Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on digital transformation. Stay with us now to learn how agile companies are fending off disruption in favor of innovation. Our next case study explores how linen services industry leader AmeriPride Services uses big data to gain a competitive and comprehensive overview of its operations, finances, and culture. We'll explore how improved data allows for a disparate company, division, and organizations under a single umbrella to become more aligned, to act more as a whole, greater than the sum of the parts. This is truly the path to a digital business. Here to describe how digital transformation has been supported by innovations at the big data core, we're joined by Stephen John, CIO at AmeriPride Services in Minnetonka, Minnesota. Welcome, Stephen.
Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. We're also joined by Tony Ordner. He's the Information Team Manager at AmeriPride Services. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. I was happy to be here, actually.
Well, great. Let's talk a little bit about your situation on the path to being a more digital, transformed organization. Many companies are doing that these days. What were the trends, perhaps, the situation, the requirements that led you to want to be more data-driven and more, perhaps, comprehensive and inclusive of how you're managing yourselves?
So one of the key business drivers for us was that we are a company in transition from a very diverse organization to a very centralized organization. So where before it wasn't necessarily important for us to speak the same data language, now it's critical. So we're developing the lexicon, the Rosetta Stone, that we can all rely on and use to make sure that we are aligned and heading in the same direction.
Great. And Tony, when we say data, are we talking about just databases, data within applications, or are we being even more comprehensive across as many information types as we can?
Yeah, right. So really it's across all of the different information types. So when we embarked on this journey, we discovered or really found out that data itself is great to have, but you also have to have processes that are defined in a similar fashion. So you really have to drive business change in order to be able to effectively utilize that data and analyze where you're going and use that to drive the business. So really through an iterative process of learning is what we're trying to institute into this organization.
And before we go much further, for those who are not familiar with AmeriPride, tell us a bit about the company. It's been around for quite a while, what you do, and how big of an umbrella we're talking about.
So a company that's over 125 years old, it's family-owned, which is nice because that gives us the fact that we're not driven by the quarter. We can make longer-term investments through the family. We can have more of a future view and have ambition to drive change in a different way than a quarter-by-quarter corporation does. We are in the laundry business. We are in the textiles and linen business. What that means is, for food and beverage, we handle tablecloths, napkins, chef coats, aprons, those types of things. In oil and gas, we're safety garments that are required. We also are the mats as you walk in the door of various restaurants or retail stores. We're also in hospitals and the various needs of cleansing things coming out of hospitals. So we're very diverse. We're the largest company of our kind in Canada, probably about fourth in the U.S. and growing.
Mm-hmm. And this is a function that many companies don't view as core, so they're very happy to outsource it. However, you need to remain competitive in a dynamic world. There's lots of innovation going on. We've seen disruption in, say, the taxi cab industry, the hospitality industry. Many companies like yourselves are saying, well, we don't want to be a deer in the headlights. We need to get out in front of this. So, Tony, how do you continue to get out in front of this, not just at the data level, but at the cultural level?
So part of what we're doing is we're defining those standards across the company, and we're coming up with new programs and new ways to get in front of and next to and partner with the customers. So as part of our initiative, we're installing a lot of different technology pieces that we can use handhelds to be right there with the customer, make changes with them as partners, maybe better understand their business and products that they aren't buying from us today that we can provide. So really trying to build that partnership with them together and provide them more ways to access our products and other ways they might not have thought of using our products and our services. So with all of those data points, it allows us to do a much better job of that.
And we've heard here at the HP Big Data Conference the concept that it's the analytics that are at the core of the organization that then drive innovation, that drive operations. Is that something you subscribe to, and is that part of your thinking?
So for me, you have to extend it a little bit further. So what we were was a corporation where we were really driven by the experience and judgment of the leadership. But what we discovered is we really wanted to be more data-driven in our decision-making. And so what data does is it creates a context for conversation. And then, as the final filter, comes that judgment and experience of the leaders. And they leverage that data to make better decisions. The data in and of itself doesn't drive the decisions. It's that experience and judgment of the leadership that's that final filter. I think we often forget the human element at the end of that and think that everything's being driven by analytics when analytics is a tool and will remain a tool that helps leaders lead great companies.
Stephen, tell us a little bit, if you would, about your background. You were at a startup, a very successful one, on the leading edge of how to do things different when it comes to apps, data, and cloud delivery.
Yeah, it was actually, you're referring to Workday. I was actually Workday's 33rd customer, first to go global with their product, and then joined Workday in two roles, as their strategic CIO, working very closely with the sales force, helping CIOs understand the cloud and the advantages of software as a service, and also as their VP of Mid-Market Services, where we were developing new ways to innovate, to implement in different ways, much more rapidly. And it was a great experience. And I've done two things in my life. I've done startups and turnarounds, and I thought that I was kind of stepping back and taking a relaxing job with AmeriPride, but in many ways it's both. It's both a turnaround and a startup, and I'm actually really enjoying the experience.
Great. Let's hear a bit about how you translate a technology advancement into a business advancement. And the reason I ask it in that fashion is that it seems as a bit of a chicken and the egg, that they need to be done in parallel: strategy, ops, culture, as well as technology. How are you balancing that difficult equation?
So let me give you an example. Again, it goes back to that idea of if you just have the human element, they may not know what to ask. And when you get the analytics, then you suddenly create a set of questions that drive to a truth. One of the things we discovered is we're very route-based. We've got over 1,000 trucks out there delivering our product. When we started looking at margin, which is one of the key things that make companies profitable, we discovered that our greatest margin was from those customers that were within 1 mile of another customer. So that changes how we sell. That changes how we don't sell, or how we might actually let some customers go. And it helps drive up our margin. And so, you got that piece of data, and suddenly we as leaders suddenly knew some different questions to ask and different ways to orchestrate programs to drive higher margin.
Another trend we've seen is putting data and analytics, very powerful tools, in the hands of more people can have unintended, often very positive consequences. We've also seen, again, here at the conference, the idea that a knowledge worker isn't just in a cube in front of a screen, that often they're in the trenches doing real work that can have real insight. Has that kicked in yet, and are you democratizing analytics?
Well, that's a really great question. So we've been trying to build a power user base and really bring some of these capabilities into the business segments to allow them to explore the data. Now, one of the things I did here, too, in this conference is you always have to kind of keep the eye on them, because sometimes they can come to the wrong conclusions, right, as well as the right ones. So it's really trying to make sure that we maintain that business layer, that final check, that kind of that gut that says, the data is telling me this. Is that really where it is? I liken it to having a flashlight in a dark room, right? And that's what we're really doing with visualizing this data and allowing them to illuminate certain things. And that's how they can raise the questions. What's in this room? Oh, well, let me look over here. Let me look over there. So that's kind of how I see that. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things I worry about is if you give people too much information or unstructured information, then they really get caught up in the academics of the information, and it doesn't necessarily drive a business process or drive to a business result. And they can sometimes get lost in the weeds of all the data. And so you have to still orchestrate it. You still have to kind of administrate it. You have to guide it. But also you do let people kind of go off, and we actually have a competition amongst our power users where they go out and create something, and they come in, and there's judges and prizes and those types of things. So we do try to encourage the innovation, but we also kind of want to hold the reins in just a little bit.
And that gets to the point of having a tight association between what goes on in the core and what goes on at the edge, and being mindful that the user experience, the interface, the ability to automate and even maybe use machine learning capabilities helps triage the data so that the analytics that are in the most contextual capacity are delivered to the right people at the right time. So tell us a little bit about the core to edge equation. Is that something that you're dabbling in as well?
Well, so my thought there is it gets back to that idea of a common lexicon. If you think about evolution, you don't want a Madagascar or Tasmania where groups get cut off and then they develop their own truth or a different truth, or they interpret data in a different way, where they create their own definition of revenue or they create their own definition of customer. And so you have to, if you think about it as orbits, you have to have a balance. Now, maybe you only need to touch certain people in an outer orbit once a month, but you got to touch them once a month to make sure they're connected. And the thing about orbits and keeping people in the proper orbits is that if you don't, one of two things happens. They either spin out of orbit or they come crashing in. And so the idea is what's the right balance for the right groups to keep them aligned with where we're going and what the data means and how we're using it.
All right, let's talk about going back to this ability to pull together the data from disparate environments. I imagine, like many organizations, you have SaaS apps. Maybe it's for human capital management. Maybe it's for sales management. How does that data then get brought to bear with internal apps? Some of them may even be on mainframes still, or virtualized apps from older code bases and so forth. What's the hurdle, and maybe what words of wisdom might you impart to others who are more early in this journey of how to make all that data common and usable? Tony?
That tends to be a hurdle, right? So the data acquisition piece, as you set these things up in the cloud, a lot of the times the business units themselves are doing these things. They're making the agreements. They don't put into place the data access that we've always needed. So that's been kind of our biggest hurdle, is they'll sign the contracts, not getting us involved until they say, oh my gosh, we need the data. And we look at it and we say, well, it's not in our contracts, so now it's going to cost more to access the data. So that's kind of been our biggest hurdle for the cloud services that we've done. Once you get past that, web services has been a great thing, and so once you get the licensing and the contract in place, it becomes a very simple process, and it becomes a lot more seamless. But that's been the biggest hurdle that we've had.
So maybe something to keep in mind is always think about the data before, beginning, and after your involvement with any acquisition, any contract, any vendor.
Absolutely. I mean, I always refer to, especially with software as a service, at the end of the day, you own three things. You own the process design, you own the data, and you own the integration points. When we construct a contract, or when I construct a contract, one of the things I always insist upon is what I refer to as the prenuptial agreement. What that simply means is before the relationship begins, you understand how it can end. And the key thing in how it ends is that you can take your data with you, that it has a migration path, that they haven't created a stickiness that traps you there, and you don't have the ability to migrate your data to somebody else, whether that's somebody else in the cloud or back to an on-premise.
All right, let's talk about lessons learned in infrastructure. Clearly, you've had an opportunity to look at a variety of different platforms, different requirements that you've had that you've tested and required for your vendors. What is it about HPE Vertica that is appealing to you, and how does that factor into some of these digital transformation issues?
So there are two things that come to mind right away for me. One is there were some performance implications. So we were struggling with our old world and certain processes that ran 36 hours. We did a proof of concept with HPE and Vertica, and that ran in like 17 minutes. So right there, we were sold on performance changes. As we got into it and negotiated with them, the other big advantage we've discovered is the licensing model with the amount of data versus the core model that everyone else runs with CPU cores. So we're able to scale this and provide that service at a high speed, right? So we can maintain that performance without having to take penalties against licensing. And those are a couple of things that I see.
Absolutely.
Anything from your Stephen?
No, I think that was just brilliant.
Okay.
How about on that acquisition and integration of data? Is there a issue with that you've been able to solve?
So the acquisition and integration, we are still early in that process. We're still learning about how to put data into Vertica in the most effective manner. So we're really at our first source of data, and we are looking forward to those additional pieces. And we have a number of different telematics pieces that we want to include, wash aisle telematics as well as in-vehicle telematics. So we're looking forward to that. There's also scan data that I think is sooner on the horizon. So all of our garments and our mats have chips in them. So we scan them in and out so we can see the activity and where they flow through the system. So those are some of our next targets to bring that data in and take a look at that and analyze it. But we're still a little bit early on that process as far as multiple sources, but we are really looking forward to some of the different ways that Vertica will allow us to connect to those data sources.
I suppose another important consideration when you're picking and choosing systems and platforms is that extensibility. When RFID tags are important now, we're expecting even more sensors, more data coming from the edge, the information from the Internet of Things, if you will. You need to feel that the systems you're putting in place now will scale out and up. Any thoughts about the Internet of Things impact on what you're up to?
Well, we've had several conversations just this week with HPE and their teams, and they're coming out to visit with us on that exact topic. Being about a year into our journey, we've been doing two things. We've been forming the foundation with Vertica, and we've kind of been getting our own house in order. So there's a fair amount of cleanup and overcoming the sins of the past as we go through that process. But Vertica is a platform. It is a platform that we've only tapped a small percentage of its capability. And in my personal opinion, HP is only aware of a portion of its capability. There are a whole set of things that it can do that I don't believe we have even discovered. So with that said, we are going to do what you just described and what Tony just described, where we're going to use the telematics coming out of our trucks. We're going to track safety and seat belts. We're going to track green initiatives and routes and the analytics around our routes and fuel consumption. And we're gonna make the place safer. We're gonna make it more efficient, and we're going to get proactive in being able to tell when a machine is going to fail, when to bring in our vendor partners to get it fixed before it disrupts production.
It really sounds like there's virtually no part of your business in the laundry services industry that won't be in some way beneficially impacted by more data, better analytics delivered to more people. Is that fair?
I think that's a very fair statement. And as I prepared for this conference, one of the things I learned, right, and I've been with the company for 17 years, is we have done a lot of technology changes, and technology has taken an added significance within our company. So when you think of laundry, you certainly don't think of technology, but we have been at the leading edge of implementing technology to get closer to our customers, closer to understanding our products. I mean, I think it's become really ingrained within the industry, at least at our company.
Yeah, it is one of those few projects where everyone is united, everybody believes that success is possible, and everybody's willing to pay the price to make it happen.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how linen services industry leader AmeriPride Services uses big data to gain a common and comprehensive overview of its operations, finance, and its culture. And we've learned how improved data allows for more types of work in an organization to become more intelligent, and to find new efficiencies and benefits, even those that you probably hadn't thought of before. So please join me in thanking our guests. We're here with Stephen John, CIO at AmeriPride. Thank you, Stephen.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And also Tony Ordner, Information Team Manager at AmeriPride. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. It's been fun, Dana.
And a big thank you to our audience as well for joining us for this Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer Digital Transformation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of HPE-sponsored interviews. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.